Coming to you from a basement in Colorado, these two childhood best friends try to expand their horizons by experiencing the best in art, music, movies, literature, and experiences. These cultural pearls might get trampled in the process, but at least the pigs are going to be happy. This is the Swine Before Pearls podcast with Joel and Trent.
Hello, Joel.
And this is Trent.
This is the Swine Before Pearls podcast.
Good job. You said it correctly.
Thank you. Yeah, this is our first episode coming out right out the gate. Trent, you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk about the premise first and then get to the inspiration. But the premise behind this is basically that we're just two random dudes, kind of not cultured dudes.
Not
all
really,
things
yeah.
considered. And I started like getting into more reading and just developing like this kind of thirst for knowledge where I say, you know, I want to better myself by like being more aware of the world around me, being more aware of culture. And so that's kind of the premise is we want to find movies, albums, books, and experiences ultimately. And we're literally going to go out and find new experiences as part of this and combine all of that into a podcast that is all about seeking out experiences. And we want to take you guys on that journey with us.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool because we're both experiential people. I think I've had a decent amount of experiences up to this point. You've had a decent amount of experiences up to this point. But, you know, I never grew up reading the classics, listening to classic albums, watching classic movies, having some of these traditional experiences. So it's kind of cool to see us as, you know, in our mid-20s, having these experiences finally and getting to kind of share them together and expanding our knowledge of the world, expanding our experiences of the world. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff along this ride. We're going to be, you know, not only doing all this media, but we're going to be out in the world trying stuff out and seeing what that's like for us. And it's going to be a journey. You know, everyone listening to this is going to kind of be along the ride with us as we're going along with this. So it's very exciting. I'm very excited for this. I've been waiting to get this done and start this. So, I mean, yeah, we're going to just get into it and see where this goes.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be a great time. Yeah. And I guess I said I'd talk about kind of the backstory for me. And I think this year has been kind of chaos for everyone. And like when I think back on all the chaos, like COVID definitely impacted my life, but I don't even think of it in terms of all the chaos that's happened. Because I've worked like so many jobs. I was an insurance salesman. I was a 911 operator.
Yeah.
I can't even remember my last. I was a supervisor at a bowling alley. And now I can't talk about too much what I do now because I feel like if I told you exactly what I did, I'd just dox myself because it's like such a unique job. But I work in education now. So just doing that and then trying to expand my mind outside of that and, you know, seek out experiences has really led me to the point where it's like, I want to like experience everything that life has to offer. I want to expand my mind.
Within safe parameters.
Parameters.
I made some suggestions for this podcast, Joel, and they were thrown off the table immediately. So
no, I gave them some thought, but we're not. Maybe I'm not going to go do peyote. Sorry, Joel.
Okay. Well, that'll be a solo episode.
All right, I mean, you could probably carry a solo episode.
I'll come back with the results and let you know how it goes.
I could talk to you about your experience with peyote.
So we kind of have a little bit of a structure for how we want to do this. We're going to split this up into, you know, different episodes are going to contain different content. And we're going to release a little bit of our schedule so people can follow along and, watch the things we're watching, read the things we're reading, and listen to the things we're listening to. We're going to provide as much context for that if people aren't doing that, but if people want to follow along, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So we're doing a movie for our first week of the month, and then we're doing an album review, and then we're doing a book review, and then we're going to cap it off with some wild experience that's going to be brand new to the both of us, which is going to be really sweet, and that's going to be cool to have everyone follow along as well.
And important to note, I think it's going to be easy to trip up on this word, but these aren't exactly reviews. They're more
our experiences.
Yeah, there are
with
experiences with these pieces of media because we're not reviewers. We're not coming at this from an angle of like we're super knowledgeable about movies.
No.
And we're giving you like this refined take.
I'm not logic oriented like that either, so that would be complete mush for me. I mean, I'm not going to be able to
We're here to talk about life.
Yeah.
And use these stories and pieces of art as a way to facilitate conversations about life.
Yeah, it's going to be really cool. It's going to be a really cool medium to explore this with. So should we just like jump into it and see where we go?
We'll talk about the Shawshank Redemption.
Shawshank Redemption.
So talk about maybe just some first impressions you had before you even saw the movie. What was your general idea of the movie?
So I remember we had this movie on DVD in my house. And it was to me when I was younger, it seemed like a very violent film that I was not allowed to touch. So I kind of kept it out of my brain, kept it out of my memory. And then, you get older and it's like, oh, it's 3 hours long. It's probably some really long period piece. I don't know. There was nothing that like ever made me want to watch this movie. There was nothing that made me seek it out on my own until we started going through this. But I think my initial reactions was like, it's such a different film in the sense of the setting. I think its setting is very different from a lot of prison movies or prison TV shows.
Yeah. And I had a very similar experience too. Like I heard the name like as a kid and I thought that sounds too violent.
You hear Shank in it.
That's it. That's all it takes and you're like, I'm out.
Literally has an active
I'm too young
violence.
for this. Yeah, I remember this girl I was dating, she wanted to watch it with me and like I was just kind of like, like is it really going to be that good? Like yeah, I had kind of that same like, oh, is it just gonna be like some long period piece?
It's gonna be a movie that you get 30 minutes into, and then you're making out, and then you never watch the rest of it.
But yeah, I mean, I was super like, I don't know what the word is. I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah,
which, even to a certain extent, not surprised because our selection process for this was we just took the highest rated movie on IMDb and said we'll go with it.
And this was ranked as the highest. So
yes. So I figured it'll probably be good. It's just a matter of whether it reaches out. Definitely did.
I think I had a little bit of when I heard it was the highest ranked movie, I think I came in high expectations. I was like almost looking for something to find wrong with it to be like, this is the general consensus, and so therefore I hate it.
Oh yeah.
Which is how I sometimes react to things. But I came in with a pretty open mind for the most part, and I was honestly blown away.
Yeah.
I think this might be one of my favorite pieces of film I've seen in the last few years, because I mean the themes alone surrounding this movie, I got latched on immediately to the themes. And a big theme is, I wrote down like friendship, hope, freedom,
Yeah. I think,
and they're complex too. They're not just stuff.
It's not surface level themes.
No, it's so deep. You have to dig into
the
it.
triumph of the will was really what stuck with me. But let's get into the structure. Let's dive into the plot. And we'll just start off right at the beginning of the movie. So we have Andy Dufresne. He is sitting in front of his wife's shack, or I guess it's the other guy's shack, with a gun, and then it's
Just like a random cabin.
yeah, it's a random cabin, but that's cut back and forth between that and the court scene where he is put on trial for the murder of his wife. So you're like seeing the court trial of the event that is supposedly taking place.
Yeah. I think the court scene kind of messed me up because I wasn't sure what kind of movie I was in for. Like I was watching the court scene and I was like, is this going to be like
A court drama?
a court drama or going through this? Is it going to be a murder mystery? You know,
Yeah.
when with the court scene at the start, I think that was my last piece of hesitation because I wasn't sure where it was going to go.
That was actually, the court scene was a very good selling point for me because I was instantly able to look, and I think the movie set up very well in my mind just by Andy's general behavior that this guy is innocent. And there's nothing in the movie that like specifically enforces that quite at that point. It's kind of left up to the imagination.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm able to instantly trust him. And you look at him and you're like, wow, like I've been at some low points in my life, but like at least I'm not on trial for the murder of my wife that just cheated on me. And like I'm about to go to prison for life because somebody else killed my wife who cheated on me. Like that's about as low as you can get. Like,
and what a way to like introduce a character is just kind of being detached from the situation. Like
Oh, yeah.
like he's in shock, but he's also pretty detached, and I think that's a big part of his character personality that within the movie comes into play in so many big ways, is the fact that he is cold and calculated, you know?
yeah.
And you can see that in that initial scene is he's in shock, but he's still like kind of cold and calculating.
And
Even the judge says that.
Yeah, the judge says you're probably the coldest man I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
And that kind of sets him up as a character. Yeah, that was a pretty good scene to like set everything up. I really thought it was interesting after that when they kind of go to prison and they're dropping everybody off at prison and they have all the new inmates and stuff. How different that is from like the modern prison system, you know?
Oh,
like
yeah.
everybody gets to watch like all these new inmates come in from the yard. Like I think nowadays it's probably more of a little bit more of a private enterprise that these new inmates come in. And it's like now like everybody's coming in. And I think that's what sold the movie to me was this is in the late 1940s, I believe was when this was set. And it was such a different time period. And I feel like you get to see a lot of prison movies and they're modern, there's not really anything that's quite as in the time period of like, this is just like after World War II. And I think that atmosphere made for some really interesting dynamics that you wouldn't like. There's not like racial gangs, anything like that. It's just kind of everybody's in this big prison and you don't really know anything about them.
Yeah. I think, going into that scene, what really caught my attention was the guys taking bets with cigarettes on who's going to break down and cry.
I would have cried.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, there's no way. Like, but the part that really got me was like, this is a super messed up situation, and like, it's a super dark attitude of like, oh, who's gonna go like break down and cry? At the same time, there's something very humanizing about that, where they're in a hellscape, but they're not just empty husks being driven from one place to the next. They're still people. And
they've built their own culture.
Yeah, they have their own culture and they have their own ways to have fun and make light of hell.
And I think that's another big big part of the movie that gets introduced pretty quickly is the concept of making the most of where you are.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
You're in this spot and you've basically created your own society, and within that there's its own implications because you're watching it as like this man's losing his freedom, he's going into prison. And I think that's right where that aspect of freedom comes in, is starts right at the beginning, where it's like these people have created their own sense of freedom without being outside of prison, and
Yeah.
you're crossing into this world of new rules. And it's such a cool like transition.
And I guess next we'll head into that first night as well, which directly connects from the last scene. And they're put into this super dehumanizing situation where they're walked in front of all the other prisoners naked after being washed off with cold water. And like every single ounce of their humanity is stripped away, to the point where, you have a guy crying. And, I think that's very understandable. We talked about, we probably would both do that.
Yeah.
But then the guards come in and beat the guy to death just because he's like showing very human emotion.
Well, and it's interesting too, because like the prisoners, even though they're like kind of put at odds against each other, when the fat guy is getting, thrown out and getting beaten, you can hear the concern in the other prisoner's voice of like, hey, you need to like keep it down. It turns from like this game until like, hey, this got really serious really quickly. And I think everyone is humanized in that situation except for the guards. The guards are kind of just doing their thing.
And the movie does a very good job. I don't think it ever says explicitly, but it shows 1,000 times over that the people running the prison belong in it just as much, if not more, as the people who
100%. I mean,
and it's a really good example of show don't tell, because I think that message could come across as very ham-fisted and lazy and preachy. But it just showed the message.
Yeah.
And that's actually a very true reality of prison. My dad worked in like a prison outreach nonprofit for a while. And he talked about how like parole officers and all of them are just as bad as the people they're taking care of.
Yeah.
He had worked with parole officers who were dealing drugs out of the halfway houses. Like that's the reality of the system, is that a lot of the people who are running the prisons belong in them.
Yeah. When I was working like a couple jobs ago, I had a manager and he was a former prison guard. And, I was like talking to him about like what that experience was like for him. And he kind of said the same thing. It's so interesting how that environment can just like take everybody in, not just the inmates. It's sad to see, but this film did such a good job of portraying that. And like you said, it wasn't preachy. Everything, you could feel things. You didn't have to hear it or, have it said to you. You could just feel things that gave you your initial.
The messages are very clear, but they're not told directly.
Yeah.
All right. So, we go through things. They have breakfast together, and then things start getting a little scary when Andy is approached by Boggs in the shower, and
I thought that was just a nice interaction between two dudes.
Very pleasant interaction between two gentlemen in the shower, as you do.
I just know that Boggs was the same actor that played the replicant in the original Blade Runner movie, and I couldn't get that out of my head. And God. I'm like, there's a replicant in the shower with you. What are you doing?
Oh no.
No,
Andy, get out of the shower.
Andy, stop. Yeah, that was an interesting moment for sure. But yeah, you can kind of tell immediately. And the thing is, Andy, I think Andy's just a great character study for how he reacts to things in prison, because he's so unaware and so nonchalant about stuff and it's ultimately what makes him into the person that he is. It's how he reacts, like that cold, uncaring way about him. You can even see it in that first scene. He just like, with Boggs, like he just kind of brushes it off. He doesn't have to like recognize it or register it. It's still like this cold, uncaring guy.
And it's not like he doesn't care. I mean, he later on like really shows how much he cares for other people throughout.
Well,
the
no,
movie.
yeah. I mean, but he's like kind of uncaring about like the environment he's in, like he's
unfazed.
He's unfazed. He's just there and he's kind of keeping his head down and his mouth shut.
And then going forward, Andy asks for a rock hammer from Red, and that's kind of their first real interaction. And I think what really set this apart for me is this movie has kind of like a mousetrap plot. In Mousetrap, how like every little piece connects and all sets up towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that was incredibly exciting because you didn't see it coming. And it all starts in this scene when he asks for a rock hammer, and that rock hammer ends up leading to the end of it.
Yeah, I think the rock hammer is like a really cool like red herring because it's just so small. You can't do anything with it. So you think for a moment, oh, I was I'm like, this is a 2.5 hour long movie and he already just asked for the hammer. Like, are we going to get a breakout scene? Because that's how most prison break movies go, is like, okay, here's the tool that allows my freedom. If anything, I would consider this more of a heist movie than a prison break movie.
But one that you don't realize is a heist movie until
no, because it's not doesn't suck.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Heist movies just suck.
Yeah. And with that, Red has this little monologue. He's monologuing throughout the whole movie, and it works. In a lot of other movies that wouldn't have worked, but it worked for this one. But I thought it was very funny that Red is just kind of impressed by Dufresne's Sigma male grind set.
Sigma male grind set. No, I appreciated that too, because I immediately saw that as like, oh, this is cool. That like this guy's been here long enough that he can recognize something new. We don't have to go through this whole 40-minute process of him trying to build, Andy building Red's trust. It was just this immediate reaction. And that's when I get into a part of Andy's character that struck me the most in this film. And it shows up a lot of time, but it's this quiet charisma. He has this quiet charisma around him that isn't like loud, obnoxious charisma, but it's this charismatic element that makes people want to trust him, want to be around him.
Relatable. That's just me. I'm fishing for.
But do you feel that though?
Yeah, no, he's great.
Like there is a charismatic element about him, and he's not the loudest guy in the room.
But he's a very attractive personality because he draws you in with that quietness. And then you get really familiar with him as in the next scene he is abused in a very unfortunate way.
He is abused.
Luckily, it's not seen on camera. But man, that hits like a truck.
Yeah.
Because they set it up for a while, and you're just kind of dreading it in the back of your head.
Yeah.
And then it finally happens.
Yeah. I was stupid because I thought they were just going to leave that alone.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was like, oh, they're not going to do anything with that.
It's just like, oh, this prison sucks. Here's some guys who want to abuse you, but they won't.
Yeah, they won't. It's a rated R film. I don't know what I was. I guess I try to look for the hopeful outcome of things. I was like, oh yeah, he wasn't interested, so obviously they're going to say no.
Yeah, it shows another aspect of reality. Like people joke about sexual abuse in prison, and this movie shows you the reality of it in a very like surreal and ugly, or not surreal, it's very real and ugly way.
Yeah.
And it's horrifying to see, and the movie just like gives that straight up to you, like there it is.
Yeah, and it happens for a while too.
Yeah.
So it's like a whole sequence. It's, it's not like, oh, this one bad thing happened and then he becomes the top dog and everything's okay. It's like, I think that's what makes Andy such a good like character, is because you get to watch this like ongoing struggle that's like, I think they say it's for a couple of years, like 2 years or something.
Oh yeah.
They mentioned that it's the first 2 years of his time in Shawshank. Man, talk about character motivation to get out of there.
And I think without stuff like that, you might be tempted to think, well, like Andy's experience in prison isn't that bad. I mean, he makes the best of it, and like he does so many good things that maybe you start to think maybe the prison life isn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And scenes like that do put the reality into the movie where it's like, no, this sucks. And Andy is actually like an incredible person because he is able to push through all of those awful things and make the best of a horrible situation. The horrible situation is not made the best of just by the fact that it's not so bad. Because, that's a blatant misconception.
Also, that leads into passage of time in this movie. Man, you go through a lot of years within those 2.5 hours.
Yeah, and you feel it too.
You feel it. You get to watch it, and I think that's crazy because it feels so natural. It's like, oh, he's just living in prison, and then they're like, yeah, you've been in here 30 years, and you're like, oh man, that's a lot of life that this guy's missed out on. It's pretty crazy.
That's a real loss. So then moving on, we have the opportunity that Red afforded all of his buddies. They all got to work on top of the roof. And nothing really special about the work itself, but Andy really shows his character again and finds the best way to make the best of the situation.
Boy, what an unpredictable scene for a first-time watcher.
Because, I mean, you get this guard and, like, he's ranting about taxes, and it's like, yeah, I get it, dude. Like, you're annoyed with your taxes. Like, obviously, nobody wants to lose a large portion of their gift. But the prisoners are like, man, what a jerk this guy is.
Yeah.
Like, man, it must really suck for you having to lose a big portion of the large sum of money you got while we're suffering in prison.
Working on a roof. I think this was the scene that fully locked in that idea of Andy Dufresne being charismatic for me. Because it takes someone with a listening ear to somebody else's stuff to find your connection to that and use that connection for benefit.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that is a total charismatic tactic. Like you hear somebody talking in the store about sports, and like you're in line with this guy waiting in this long line about, 5 people or whatever, and you hear him mention something about sports. Maybe you know something about sports and you jump in brave. You don't know how this guy's going to react to you, but you find that topic that you know something about and you jump in on that. And you say, here's my in with this person. And I mean, the way it goes down on the rooftop is far more extreme and violent, almost cost him his life. But it ends up working because people work like that. People are looking, for that connection and then to benefit off that connection.
Yeah. Although there is some serious anti-charisma there. I would not lead any conversation, especially as a prisoner, with "Do you trust your wife?"
I think that's pretty charismatic.
I mean, it's a hook, but I mean,
you got him listening.
Yeah. Really attentive ears.
Do you trust your wife?
No. But
Trent is not married. If anybody's listening to this, he's single as a Pringle, looking for a wife that he can mistrust.
yeah.
Anyways, what were you saying?
But it's not pure charisma, right?
It's not.
He has his own style of charisma.
It's
and he
this
approaches
Andy
the situation,
Dufresne style.
uniquely.
Yeah, it's
very
crazy.
very likable guy, and
He's
very.
not. He's like not though. Like
Oh,
on
I
the surface,
like him.
but on the surface, he's not a likable guy. Like if you met him in a
At his bank.
or if you had to like deal with him in like an everyday life situation outside of that, I don't think he would be that likable. But I think in prison, he is becoming the person he's always wanted to be. That's like a big part that I got. He's using that prison experience to better himself, to become the person he's always wanted.
Oh, that's actually very insightful. I had not thought about it like that, but that is a very interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it's another way that the plot just kind of moves forward and all ties together, and it does it right under your nose.
No, it doesn't, and that's what I love about that. It sets up that element of the plot so early.
Yeah. And that does lead into the next idea where it's the final abuse. He gets beat up really bad by Boggs, and the prison warden catches on, and Andy just did a huge favor for him.
Mm-hmm.
Not the warden, the guard.
The guard, yeah.
And it pays to do good by other people.
Yeah.
Because now the guard just beat the ever living crap out of Boggs to the point where he's disabled.
Man, that really makes your everyday interactions change, because you never know when that guy's gonna like, beat the crap out of somebody who's hurting you. No, but I loved how that set up. Like that was such a great way of setting up. That wasn't like, oh, he did that thing for that guy, so now it works like this.
And it wasn't like a Deus Ex Machina, God in the Machine sort of deal.
Yeah.
Where like someone comes from above and it's like, okay, we see this is wrong, it's time to stop it. Like, no, this is Andy makes the moves to make his life better.
Yeah.
Every step of the way.
He's actively working on that. He's like the ultimate self-help boy.
And his charisma continues to pay off in the warden's inspection. The warden comes by, and Andy has that poster up that he asked Red for. Another clever misdirection.
Boy, yeah. The warden, though.
Oh yeah,
we haven't even gotten into the warden.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of skipped over his introduction, but like, boy, from the beginning you can tell
self-deluded.
Yeah, and like, man, it really, like, it's angering to watch him. He thinks he's doing good by just like shoving religion down the prisoners' throats, but it's like, you don't care about these guys.
Yeah,
you're not actually doing good for them. You just doing good on the surface level.
It's all self-interest. Like, that's at the end of the day what he's doing. Everything is a guise, and he's just, it's funny, everybody's looking to profit off of everybody in the prison for some way or another. If you kind of look at it, there's a few characters that aren't looking for that, but like Brooks isn't really looking for that.
Yeah, he's found his life.
But a lot of people, like, as soon as they find like Red, he wants to be friends with Andy. Andy wants to be friends with Red, but there's like this business transaction.
Yeah,
there's a lot of like business transactions going on.
They're always kind of using each other for advantage.
Yeah,
they have a healthy relationship, but it's still a one of benefit.
But just like the guards, it's the same way with the warden, where it's like there's some sort of business transaction, some sort of respect transaction. Like Andy quotes the Bible to him, and it's like, oh, that's my thing.
Yeah.
So now I have like a little bit of respect for you, that I'm not going to take this poster off your wall and reveal the big thing that's been building.
Which Andy desperately needed to make that connection. So once again, he shows his resourcefulness in that.
Very resourceful. I also like I also like how he actually, when he's asking for these things, like the soapstone, all this stuff, and the rock tool, the rock tool, all that stuff, he's using it. He's using it for his own eventual benefit, but he's making like art,
Yeah,
and he's making the place his home.
He has genuine purposes and illicit purposes.
Yeah, and I think that's such, like, the illicit purposes are like fine for the plot, but I also like seeing the genuine purposes where it's like this guy didn't just get his little rock tool and then start hammering away at a wall in the middle of the day. Like he like wanted to make things because he actually wanted to make things as well. Like he's actually doing things that are passing time.
And he stumbles by his escape plan by accident.
Yeah.
And then he sees the opportunity. When there's an opportunity, he takes it.
Yeah.
But he's not there. That wasn't his original plan.
Yeah.
And the warden notices Andy's cleverness and brings Andy to his office, says he's going to start working in the library. And something that immediately pops up is in the warden's office, there's a sign that says his judgment cometh and that right soon, which also plays into the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really the Chekhov's gun of the movie where you see that and you're like, that has thematic importance. They're not just throwing that on the wall willing.
That's a big film term you just dropped
Yeah.
there.
I'm talking about big boy terms today. I'm wearing a nice shirt. Nobody can see it.
I was just like, oh man, that sign on the wall is pretty biblical. I wonder if that's gonna come back at any point. I didn't know that was Krakow's rifle.
Chekhov's gun. Have you never heard that term?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so the idea.
I'm an idiot here, so
yeah.
you're gonna have to enlighten
this
me.
This podcast is called Swine Before Pearls.
And I am a pearl. I mean, a swine.
You're a pearl.
I'm a pearl.
But the idea is basically if there's some guy called Chekhov, and he had this idea that if a gun is put into a drawer in chapter 1 in a book, it's gonna get fired in a later chapter.
Oh, okay.
So the idea is that there's setup and payoff to everything.
So this Chekhov guy was a huge nerd.
Yeah, he was a huge nerd. That's the takeaway from this whole
what
podcast.
happens to nerds in Russia, right?
No.
I don't either.
I figured you'd have a better idea.
No, I didn't have anything. I thought they were just going to get beat up or something. Probably like in America.
I mean,
probably in
that's been your interaction with Russia and stuff, right?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Why'd you bring the bat over?
Well, to think about all the people I'm going to beat up. What that was there for. Okay. I was trying to lead. That was the Chekhov's gun for that joke.
Yeah. Nobody even knows what we're talking about because maybe they heard the bat drop.
Yeah, there's
there's
a bat I put on the side of this table along with this mining helmet because if we had a camera, there'd be funny props, and they're just props that we get to enjoy and you don't. So do with that what you will.
And then we see someone who is kind of the opposite of Andy in a way. I mean, not really. He just has a very different mindset, and that is Brooks is clinging to the straws of life by threatening Haywood with a knife.
Can I just say that Brooks is like my favorite character?
Oh, he's so likable. He has that introduction scene where he asks Andy for the little maggot that's in his food.
The little burb in his pocket.
Yeah.
And you think he's going to eat the maggot. And
then he just pulls out the burb. He's such a likable old man, and you want the best
He's
for him.
very zen in that prison context. He's very zen.
He's made the best of his life.
Yeah.
And
that's why that scene where he's holding up the knife is so violent, because it's like, oh my gosh, this guy's so chill and he's so afraid of getting thrown into the outside.
Yeah, he'll do anything. And he says, "This is my only way to stay."
Yeah.
And you don't realize it. You think like, man, life must suck for him on the outside. But as we quickly figure out, he's clinging to, he's clutching at straws to basically stay alive. He knows he's gonna not not live through the other side of prison.
I don't, and I think it's that, and it's also, I think this is where the element of freedom came to me, because for a lot of people watching the movie, or thinking about prison, freedom is the outside. But if you're institutionalized, like they talk about, he had his own sense of freedom in the inside. That was his own life, his own, society.
And that's a real thing that happens. People, you're raised by the prison system. You don't know how to operate outside of it. That there's a reason why our recidivism rate is so high in prisons. I'm using big boy words again. But like, guys are coming back to prisons not because they're just bad people. It's because they don't know how else to live life but in prison.
So, weird side note, I was watching Gordon Ramsay in prison with a bunch of inmates, and he was trying to start a bakery, and one guy said he had been in and out 30 times. I mean, this is a UK prison, so he was probably in there for having an unusually sharp pencil or something.
Or he didn't purchase his television
He didn't
license.
have his telly license. But this guy was in and out for like 30 times, and they said, he said, well, why have you done it? And it's like, he's like, because I don't know how to work on the inside, on the outside. And on the inside, it's basically like summer camp in here in a way. You just kind of like, you have your stuff that you go to, but there's no responsibility. There's no, you're not taught responsibility. You're not taught anything else like that. You're just in here, and you're kind of just hanging out with your buddies, and and that becomes your own sense of life. And to go out of that, and especially like, I really hated the supermarket scene with, I think the supermarket.
Oh, the one where he's working.
At the supermarket. That killed me.
It feels so hopeless. Like,
that killed me.
You think about that. That's a low end job, and that's all you can aspire to.
And
that's
he's like 80 years old bagging groceries at a supermarket. But that's how, like, even if he wasn't in prison necessarily, like, how many times do you go to like Walmart or like whatever, and they have seniors work in the front doors? And it's not because they necessarily need the money. It's just they don't have anything to do. And you kind of, I think it speaks to also, like, he's an inmate, but he's also an older dude. Like, society doesn't know what to do with like our elders, and they kind of get thrown away. So he's just working at the supermarket, living in this halfway house.
And it's not like he's an unskilled person. I think he has very employable assets.
Could have been a librarian.
He could have been a librarian. In the prison he was.
Dang, that would have been a great job for you to do. On the...
That's too bad.
Boy, but you were sure good at being a librarian. Why don't you just
If only there were a job like that on the outside.
We have more than 50 books.
Wow, incredible.
What a dang shame. Maybe you wouldn't have hung yourself. You had to go work at the grocery store.
Yeah, that's ultimately what it comes to is, he made the best of the life he had, and he can't do that again. He's too old. He's set in his ways.
No, he's done. And just to finish off on Brooks, like, like he finished himself off, but he dies with a lot, I think. Like, usually usually suicide, it's very sad, but I feel like in a way, just like he dies, like he goes out on his own
terms. That, I mean, you have to say that very carefully, because that's not something recommendable.
This is within the context of the film, though. This isn't a general conversation on suicide. It's within the film, within everything that he's experienced on stuff. I mean, he could have gone back to prison.
It's tragic, but that's it's a lose-lose for him.
Well, it's a lose-lose, and that's how sometimes the cookie crumbles. But that eventually is a callback later, so that's also
it's another piece of the puzzle. And yet another piece of the puzzle is Andy is cooking up some big ideas. Meth. He's cooking up meth. This is actually Breaking Bad. I probably would have expected this when I watched. If I would have watched this when I was like, I would have expected something down that line, just based on my misgivings about the title. But Andy is taking advantage of the situation because he's doing so much bookkeeping, right?
Yeah.
And he's doing it for the warden. A lot of the stuff is under the table, sketchy stuff, and Andy is taking advantage of the opportunity once again and making the best of his situation. And he's created a fake person that can take all the blame for all of his illicit actions. And he's resourceful enough that he can get a social security card and basically make an actual identity
And that
out of thin air from prison.
all over for the reason, like how that
Oh
all
yeah,
wrapped up in
absolutely.
everything. I was just like, oh, cool. He has
Yeah.
like a dummy.
There we
person
go.
for this to
There's
fall
an
off.
explanation for the plot.
Yeah.
Um,
I did not think of that in any significant way.
Yeah.
I also thought that was a funny sequence too, when he's like going through all the guards and then like the baseball team, like
Oh yeah, he's just collecting this list of clients, and you feel good for him because he's doing something. He's doing something good with his time, and it's like a sense of normalcy.
he's an entrepreneur too. Like he just takes advantage of a situation, does stuff. You know, he's very entrepreneurial. Then I think that.
So then we get Tommy coming in, and Tommy they instantly taking a liking to. I did not take an instant liking to him, but he kind of grows on you because you're like, yeah, he's
looks like
annoying. He's annoying, but he's like a sort of sensitive, sweet guy. And he kind of grows on you.
I think Tommy was like the only part of the movie. Like, yeah, he's kind of a cool character, but like he's really just there to deliver that one piece of plot information about Andy's wife, and like that his school system of getting people to die.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's just to carry the plot of like.
I thought it also had like quite the emotional impact because you're with him on this journey, and you see him grow, and he has a wife and kid, and I really wanted him to succeed, and it was incredibly heartbreaking to see Andy like grow this guy into something, and then he gets killed for Andy. You're a sociopath.
I was like, they're taking him out into the yard. I wonder what's gonna happen here. There's not a lot going on. I do think though that whole sequence though just shows how ruthless the villain Norton is to be like this is this man's chance at freedom, who's already been in here wrongly imprisoned, and he doesn't give it a second thought because it's benefiting him to have Andy in prison.
And at first you think like, wow, this guy's kind of a jerk, but then you realize like, oh no, well, he's not just a jerk. He's like, this is like actually
he's
evil.
A full-on villain.
Yeah,
he's a full-on villain, and I think that was perfectly that scene. So yeah,
and
now that I'm talking about it, I think that whole thing did have more importance.
The impact that it really leaves on you is like, wow, they are the kings of this world. Like they can get away with whatever they want. They have power.
Yeah, get away with
quite literally.
And the guy who played crab shot it.
Yeah.
I texted you during the watching of that movie. I was like, hey, the guy who plays the main prison guard is the voice actor for Mr. Krabs.
There we go. That's
it ruined everything.
That's a useful and interesting fact.
It's a good anecdote.
How did you figure that out while watching the movie?
Because I've seen the actor before, and I saw like all the SpongeBob characters got together to do like 5-minute skit reenacting, and I saw him, and I was immediately, wait a second.
That's Mr. Krabs.
That's the prison guard.
There he is.
He shot somebody and beat a man to death almost.
That is not who I would have expected to play Mr. Krabs.
Hey man, acting is a very
So then Andy's set free because he was in solitary, and he tells Red about his hiding spot, and you start thinking like, man, Andy's given up. He's telling Red like, when you get out, go find this,
Go find this rock.
and you're like, man, it's finally gotten the best.
Yeah, I think that scene was. I think also like the concern of like, think you Red is very cool and collected the entire movie through most things, and that's the first time you see like, Red's like genuine concern, and how deep their friendship. I mean, they've been in there longer than we've been. Obviously, there's that deep friendship. That's the first time you really see that on screen, and I think that moment,
Oh yeah,
when it
and
was like talking about hope.
it really like shows the passage of time, and you feel that well.
And they're
And yeah, that's true. You're just looking at the gray hair the whole time, like, man, they got old.
dang.
But
Andy's got to go put his dentures in before he gives up hope.
that all leads into the ending where everything finally comes together.
Mhm.
And Haywood talks to Red and is like, hey, Andy like asked for a rope, and Red's already concerned, so he thinks, man, this is it for Andy, like he's about to off himself. And they spend a long time not showing it,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no idea what to expect from the movie, and I thought that maybe Andy did off himself because I was almost ready for a sad ending.
Yeah.
And they really play with the idea, like the guard is coming up and says, you better be sick or dead in there, and you're like, oh, the irony, oh, he's dead,
Better get living or get dying.
yeah. And there he is, and he just stops in front of the gate, and it is like, oh wow, like that something crazy is going on, and you're just left to hang on that.
So, unfortunately,
Did you not get twisted up?
No, because when I was 13, I watched Robot Chicken,
Oh,
and they have
dang
a
it, Joe.
Shawshank Redemption parody. Did not understand anything about it, but
You got spoiled by Robot
but
Chicken.
the Joker was playing like kind of like an Andy Dufresne, but so was Batman, and Batman had to like crawl out of the sewer, and it turns out it was all just like a joke for Batman to just crawl through like a bunch of poop. And so I knew that like there was some sewer and some sort of escape.
you got ruined by Robot Chicken.
Yeah, so I would have felt the same way as you if I had not seen it before, but because of the geniuses over at Adult Swim, I unfortunately had that ending a little bit already.
But it does feel victorious. You watch him like wade through the poop and get out of the prison, and you feel that in your heart, like, man, it feels good for him to be out.
Let's go back to the poop.
Okay.
Because I have
But
how he like what 500 yards or
Yeah.
something. Okay, that's crazy. Like if you've ever been around a septic tank or a leach field or some sort of sewage system, or you took a dump in your toilet and you forgot to flush it and you found it the next day. I don't know if this is related, buddy, but that's just nasty. And the fact is, this man has gone through everything to the point where like crawling that last 500 yards is like the easiest thing he's done. Like that's kind of the crazy part of that ending, is when you detach yourself from like the whole movie. If you just like, yeah, this dude just crawled 500 yards of poop to get out, you just be like, oh, that's super nasty. But like when you see it in the whole context of the movie, man, that's a Sunday for him.
Yeah, that after 40 years of being treated like a non-human, what's 50 yards of poop?
What's crawling through 550? How many yards of poop that was? No, that was a good part.
So then Red gets out, and we see him living the same life as Brooke.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that very intentional like juxtaposition there between Red's life and Brooke's life, where they're headed in the same direction, but the difference is that Red has
Hope.
he has hope and he has a good friend,
Yeah.
which really makes all the difference in the world when you have someone who can pull you up out of the crap.
Yeah.
And not be like Andy didn't really do anything like to fix Red's current life. That hey, come live with me.
Yeah. And, I like that they're like, he's fixed.
Oh yeah,
That just like opens up the world for like these two dudes just on a boat, best friends in Cuba.
it really does feel like it's the boys being boys.
It's boys being boys. And sometimes you have to go through 40 years of abuse, crawling through puke.
Ew, I don't like that.
That's probably was in there too. But you go through like the worst stuff, and then it kind of pays out to that point of like now we're just gonna go live our lives.
And
live a simple.
you think about that, like he's going to enjoy every single moment for the rest of his life, knowing what the alternative is. And he made that life for himself, and he did.
And I just think it's so cool how that movie, everything wraps up, and then like the heist is revealed. The whole heist is revealed, and then every single part that you've watched is strung together, and you're like, oh my gosh, every part that happened in this movie had a purpose, do something to get to this final point, and he never, even when it seemed dark, he never like lost hope. Like there was always this continual trajectory to freedom. And I think that was done so tastefully. And that's why it's the best heist movie of all time.
Best.
Because it was just that whole, like them getting free was a backdrop for these human character studies that got to happen inside this prison. And all these like element themes that got to happen inside. And in the background there was, and that's what I like about that.
Yeah, it had the payoff without the setup, which is almost better because I feel like a lot of times setup is more exciting than payoff.
Yeah,
and you're constantly thinking, oh, what's the good payoff that's coming? Like this all has to lead to something. And I think you get the exact same satisfaction for a payoff that the setup you didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Like, oh, all the pieces just fell into place. So we have some closing questions because this is Swine Before Pearls. We are putting ourselves before what are considered the best pieces of media in history. And so the question is, how are you better off for having seen
them? How am I better off? Well, I would say I'm better off because I appreciate my and I think freedom is a state of it's a physical place, but it's also, and I think sometimes in life we feel really, whether it's a job, whether it's a life situation, we can feel really constrained and feel like my best. I don't know if you've ever felt, but I feel like that time where you get into a new job day to day, and you think, oh, I had a lot of fun when I was younger. Things now tied down. Everyone in my life, and I think Andy reminded me that you can always hope and you can always build. And here he is, probably, if he was in jail for 30 years, he's probably in his 50s now. There he is, fixing a boat with his. And I think that gave me, because as long as you're alive, and I think even Brooke, like he was in the wrong place. but it's not like his best years were necessary. If he could have had his energy, his characteristics applied somewhere different in society, he could have still found his own sense of hope. And I think I'm better off for knowing.
I think the main thing that I really got out of the movie was just a wider perspective of what life can be. I think I live a very cushy life, all things considered, and I do need to, or like, I think it's very healthy to have an awareness of like the horrors that are actually real. And this is a fictional story, but there are absolutely horrible things happening, and like we need to be aware of them. And that's reality for some people. Taught, there's all sorts of issues related to prisoners, and you just kind of ignore it and you say, well, they earned their lot in life. But that's their whole reality. They're still people. They still like there are horrors they are going through. And it was good to be opened up to that. And there is also that strong theme of hope that I think there's a very strong message of you can't fix everything that's wrong in your life. Some things are out of your control, but some things are in your control. And so it's up to you to take advantage of the opportunities that are afforded to you, no matter what situation you're in, and make the best of the horrible situation. And that doesn't mean you're not in a horrible situation, but it does mean that there is a better situation that you can at least put yourself in, and always fight for better. And you're really able to take the reins of your own life and make something better for yourself. Because you can give up and say, this is my lot in life, but you got to at least fight.
And I think you touched on a really important point. I think throughout Andy, he seizes every single moment he gets. He seizes every opportunity he gets, every conversation he has, despite being in prison. Instead of crying the first night and saying, I'm in prison, I hate this, and I'm never gonna get out, and dying. He seizes every tiny little insignificant moment of his life in there to create something better.
And he creates something beautiful, but every step of the way he's bettering his situation, even in spite of the horror. So I think that's probably where we'll wrap things up for the day. But I want to talk about our schedule going forward in case anyone wants to follow along with us. We're going to talk about the next few weeks going forward. So next week is going to be our album. And
hooray!
Joel, don't spoil your opinions.
No, I haven't spoiled any opinions on it.
We're going to be talking about What's Going On by Marvin Gaye.
What's going on, baby?
So that's going to be the album that we talk about next week. And then
this is by Four Non-Blondes, right?
No. No, we can talk about that too.
I'm going to make that joke 7 times.
Yeah.
Probably.
We should open up by singing it and then get copyright striked on our brand new podcast.
Yeah.
And then so the week after that is going to be our first book, and we're going to be reading Catcher in the Rye. So we have that to look forward to, and then we're going to decide something to do for our In the Field episodes where we go out and do something, and then talk about how we expanded our minds. So. Come back
Not
when
peyote.
Joel's done peyote. Come back when Joel's done peyote.
Oh man. Well, it was a great time. Great talking. So thanks everybody. If you were on board for this entire time, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week to talk about our album. And just want to thank Trent for just really getting us kicked off on this podcast and having some great ideas and inspiring some amazing conversation and blowing up my brain noodle. It's been really sweet.
for anyone who's listened along, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if it's nighttime, have a good night.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Swine Before Pearls podcast. Our executive producers have been Joel Kennicott, Trent Grauman, and Stephen Kennicott. Music is by Twizzled and used with permission. For more podcast information and for more episodes, please go to podcast.swinebeforepearls.com.